Welcome to my not all that secret anymore channel where I ramble about whatever I feel like in the laziest format possible. You know, I started calling this a quote unquote secret channel because I had like 3 subscribers and I have literally never advertised this channel anywhere. And so I kind of just thought it would stay at 3 subscribers. But then I started talking about Index and then people started showing up here all of a sudden. And I actually got an email from YouTube. YouTube gives me a monthly email to show like my growth, and I have 2 channels. And so to compare the channel growth of this channel, Emerald, to my music one, Praz, it's actually pretty crazy like how much more attention this channel gets now. To be fair, I haven't even uploaded on Praz CD, the quote unquote main channel, in like 4 or 5 months at this point. Hopefully that'll change soon. Anyways, a certain magical index, New Testament, my journey through the Index New Testament light novels. We are doing New Testament 11, 12, and 13 today or tonight, wherever you are in the world. I will say the next video should not be an Index video. I got something else planned. I actually recorded it like last year, but I didn't edit it because I was being lazy. But yeah, that should go up sometime, maybe soon in the future. It was just me rambling about every anime that I watched in 2021. There's no Index in it, unfortunately. But hey, we're here to talk about it now. Before I start that though, thank you for everyone that's been watching so far. The Magic God Oathness arc video that I made got 1,000 views, which is kind of crazy. Because, you know, like I said earlier, I have literally never promoted anything on this channel whatsoever. So every view that I get kind of in a way feels earned, I guess. Because, I don't know, it's just you guys clicking on it and actually watching it. I absolutely love getting the comments. I love responding to them all, seeing what you guys have to say, and it makes this a whole lot more fun knowing that there are other people out there to talk with me about this series as I read through it. And you know, it's been a grand old time, and I've been enjoying every second of reading the light novels, and even more so, I think putting my thoughts into these videos, even though they're really lazy, rambling videos, and I'm not sure why anyone watches them, but I appreciate everyone that does, and it kind of has made this experience even more memorable, as cheesy and sappy and lame as that sounds, but it's been a really fun time. So I just wanted to say that before I start. I read these volumes pretty slowly, I'll be real. I don't think I've uploaded in like 2 or 3 months at this point, which is kind of slow, but I took a bit of a break like I said I would at the end of the last video, and you know what? It was nice. I didn't read at too fast of a pace, but that's not a big deal because you know what? I enjoyed, spoiler alert, I enjoyed 11, 12, and 13 all very, very much. I actually would have a hard time even ranking them, which I'm not doing anymore, by the way. I decided I'm not going to do those like arc rankings anymore. I see people on Twitter doing these like New Testament, or not just New Testament, they do these volume, they do like a tier list for every Index volume. I think maybe I'll do that at the end of this series. I'm not sure yet, because I kind of hate making tier list videos. I like making them, but I hate uploading them because the comments are usually not very fun. But anyways, so even though it's kind of been a minute since I read New Testament 11, let's go ahead and start talking about New Testament 11, the Mental Out arc. Right off the bat, I just want to say this arc was such a nice change of pace from everything that New Testament has been building up to up until this point. The whole Gremlin saga building up to Oathness and whatnot was such a huge thing, and it involved the entire world in such a meaningful way, and it's like that arc was just so grandiose that it felt really nice to have this arc, New Testament 11, the Mental Out arc, which was so much more focused on just something a lot more personal, which was just Shokuhou Misaki and her perspective throughout this volume. And it was largely a personal conflict. And it was really refreshing to experience that as compared to what I kind of have been getting used to with Index, especially New Testament, with everything being so, I guess, larger than life, almost in a literal sense up until this point. So right off the bat, I just thought that was super refreshing. And I'm going to go ahead and say Shokuhou is probably my second favorite character in the series after reading this volume. Some people may roll their eyes at that because I know for some reason, I don't even know why, but Shokuhou has like, I think she's one of the most beloved characters in the series, and I think she's nearly unanimously loved. But the few people that really hate her seem to despise her so much as if they knew Shokuhou in real life, and she, like, I don't know, cheated on them or something, or I don't know, killed their families. Some of the way some people talk about Shokuhou on the internet, it's so beyond me why people hate this character so much. I think it's legit just like 3% of people that actually consume this series, and they're just really loud about how much they really don't like this character. But I can't say I care. Like I said, she's probably my second favorite character in the series. I'd take a wild guess who's first, right? Anyways, to get back to the volume, so this, I have to say, New Testament 11 uses flashbacks in some of the most, and probably the most interesting way I've ever seen a story actually use flashbacks. And I kind of wasn't expecting this to go in this direction, but I did really like it. And it did something extremely similar to New Testament 7, and I'll get into that in a second. But it starts off with just a flashback of Shokuhou before her chest had gotten so big. And it was just going over the time that she first met Toma. And the first chapter is very kind of, I don't know if I'd say slice of lifey, but it really is. It's very laid back, and it feels kind of casual and lighthearted, and that's just something I really enjoy. Like I said, I think it was a nice break from the huge arc that we just got over with the Oathness arc and whatnot. So I guess in terms of that tonal shift, I was really enjoying it. And then at the end of chapter 1, I believe, it has this moment where you have to reevaluate everything that you had read beforehand. As Shokuhou is going around the city and recounting her memories of Toma and where they met, when she gets to the last destination, she notices that the environment looks way different than her memory. And so that immediately makes her think that someone tampered with her memories somehow, and that psychologically kind of does a lot to her because, you know, obviously, spoiler if you read the volume, she's in love with Toma, and she doesn't want to believe that someone else implanted those feelings of love inside her for Toma. She wants those to be genuine memories, obviously. And so what I mean by the end of this chapter makes you reevaluate everything is because obviously that's revealed at the very end of the chapter, that she gets to that last location and she doesn't recognize anything there. And I say it's similar to New Testament 7 because New Testament 7 was that exact same. That was the Agitate Halation arc where Tsuchi Mikado essentially does this super wacky, goofy thing that Tsuchi Mikado does where he, sets up Toma on a mission to go after some magic users that's going to destroy the city or whatever. We've seen Tsuchi Mikado do this exact same thing with Toma before, where he essentially kidnaps him and forces him in this situation to help go after this threat. And it seems like the typical index setup in New Testament 7, but when you get to the end of that volume, you realize that Tsuchi Mikado was actually just trying to distract Toma with some complete BS that he just made up. There's not actually any threat to Academy City at the moment. And then, of course, there's a reveal that his sister, Micah, died. And it makes you rethink everything that you had read up to that point in that volume. And I felt the same exact way with New Testament 11, where I was like, oh, man, was everything that I read up until this point actually pointless? Did Shokuhou not actually meet Toma in the way that she thought she did? Are these emotions and feelings that Shokuhou was conveying throughout the first chapter all fake, or were they just implanted in her this whole time and I was just reading a bunch of basically nonsense? So even with just the first chapter, I was already hooked. And I will say this was probably one of the most enjoyable volumes for me from start to finish. There was never really a point in this volume where I was bored, which kind of happens every now and then in a New Testament volume where there will be like one section in particular where I'm like, all right, this kind of isn't all that exciting. There's even kind of a part like that in New Testament 12 and 13, right? But with 11, I just felt like it was consistently enjoyable to read through the entire time. To talk more about Shokuhou, just as a character, some of the things I wrote in my notes is that I really like the contrast between her and Toma. And this is kind of clear in sense of like their memories. Shokuhou can erase her memory at any time, but refuses to do so, which I will talk more about in a second, while Toma unwillingly lost his memories, and obviously in the first arc of the entire series, which hasn't happened yet because he actually loses his memories after this, because New Testament 11, the mental out arc, it takes place before the index arc. Which is this the earliest volume in the entire series up until this point? I think it is. In terms of the timeline, obviously, I mean. But getting back to Shokuhou and Toma's dynamic, they had just some really fun interactions early on. It's like I said, this volume it starts off like pretty lighthearted, and I always kind of enjoy stuff like that personally. But I just found that their interactions were more enjoyable to me than a lot of other girls that Toma's interacted with. There was this one there's this one reoccurring joke where I think like the first time they met, Toma like bumped into Shokuhou and he like dropped his phone or whatever, and then he ran away without realizing he lost it. And then Shokuhou asked herself, "Is this a new way of hitting on girls?" And she said that like that was kind of a reoccurring joke throughout the volume, and it was just stuff like that that I thought was really cute and endearing. I guess I would describe their interactions as being very playful, and I think it's a nice contrast to like Toma's interactions with, say, Index or even Mikoto a lot of the times. I mean, I love both of those characters quite a lot, and but I still have to say a lot of times their interactions they're kind of stressful, because I don't know, so many scenes end up with either Index being hungry or biting Toma or being jealous, and kind of the same with Mikoto being jealous or, you know, being super embarrassed and trying to, you know, zap him. It's like there's a lot of like, I guess I'd call it pressure or like odd tension in the scenes with those girls. But with Shokuhou, it didn't really feel that way. It felt a lot more playful and endearing, like I said. It's some really like charming interactions in my opinion. Now, another thing about Shokuhou's character is, well, I jokingly wrote in my notes that Shokuhou equals female Lelouch, which I guess I can kind of explain a little bit. Although I'm still mostly joking when I say that, but there are kind of some similarities between the two. Well, when you think about their powers, Lelouch, you know, from Code Geass, if you haven't seen that, it's actually probably my favorite anime, by the way, Code Geass. And Lelouch is actually my favorite character of all time, so I think it kind of makes sense why, you know, I say I love Shokuhou even more now because of this volume. And, you know, I'm kind of comparing her to Lelouch in a way. Maybe it's a little stupid of a comparison, but it's whatever. But anyways, with the nature of both of their powers, they're able to manipulate everyone around them, no matter if they're strangers, friends, or family. And Shokuhou and Lelouch, something both have in common, is that there are certain people they refuse to use their power on, at least at first. So, I mean, if you've seen Code Geass, like Lelouch, you won't see him use his ability, or at first he kind of refuses to use his Geass on Nonali, right? And I guess spoilers for Code Geass, I guess skip ahead a few seconds if you don't want to hear this. But later on, he does, you know, obviously use it when he has to. He doesn't particularly like to take advantage of people that he legitimately cares about. And Shokuhou kind of does the same thing, that she refuses to peer in the memories of Toma. And I think that's without her knowing that he even has a Imagine Breaker. And I'm not sure if she's even able to look into Toma's memories. But and another thing is she refused to use it on herself, which I thought was kind of interesting. I wrote in my notes here. It says that I had actually never thought about the fact that she faces the constant temptation of using her own ability on herself to rewrite her memories to get through hard times. And I thought that that was just it was, I don't know, it was something I had never thought about before, and that was really interesting. It's like, yeah, when you think about it, it actually takes a lot of willpower to not essentially just like, if she wanted to, she could rewrite her own mind to just feel like nothing but pure joy and look at everything super optimistically in life, or forget every bad memory she's ever had. She can do that to herself, apparently, and she refuses to do it, and that's just something that I think is really admirable about her character. So I guess to expand a little bit more upon my comparison to Lelouch, one thing on the surface is that they're both, very like psychologically focused, mentally focused, in the sense that they're both extremely unathletic, and I think they both actually use their abilities to get out of like PE classes. Did Lelouch do that? I can't remember. If not, that's something exactly you would have done. But I mean, they can't run. Neither of them can run for longer than like 10 seconds without being completely worn out. And of course, the nature of their powers are extremely similar. I mean, obviously, Shokuhou has the superior power to Gios. I mean, Gios is, you can only use it on a person once, but Shokuhou obviously can do it an unlimited amount of times. And another thing is they both actually do uphold a moral stand. They uphold themselves to a moral standard, and that's ultimately what separates them from just being like a pure villain and being someone that you could maybe refer to as an anti-hero. Shokuhou, I don't know if I'd call her an anti-hero per se, but she's definitely not an orthodox hero. Okay, I swear this is the last comparison I'll make to her and Lelouch, okay? But one thing I thought was interesting was that anyone that hasn't seen Code Geass is gonna, just think this is boring, but it's whatever. But in Code Geass, it's interesting because when everyone finds out about Lelouch's Geass and what it can do, his group, the Black Knights, all of them become entirely untrusting of Zero and paranoid about the fact that he may have manipulated them, or that he was manipulating them this entire time. And it's actually the opposite with Shokuhou, because with Shokuhou, everyone knows her ability, obviously, yet she has the largest clique on campus, and even when she's not manipulating them, they're just like so head over heels for her, which I just thought that was an interesting sort of difference, that they all know her ability. They don't really think much about it. They don't really question why they like Shokuhou so much or why they stand by her. Just kind of, if that's been expanded upon somewhere else, please let me know, because I'd be kind of interested to know if that's actually been discussed anywhere else. Anyways, I guess that's a bit of a rabbit trail that I kind of just went down, but I thought it was an interesting thought nevertheless, and it kind of made me understand, I guess, why I was liking Shokuhou even more, is kind of because she does remind me to Lelouch in some ways. So, anyways, moving on. There's this one part. It's just kind of like, I guess, a bit of like symbolism. Would you even call it symbolism? I'm not exactly sure. But there is this one scene that I really liked where Shokuhou was struggling with something that was going on in her life. And so she went to that one area. It's not exactly like a park or whatever. I can't remember what they referred to it as. It was next to like some sort of facility. And she like laid on the ground and she was stressed out, and she held up her remote to her head, and it was kind of like this cool analogy of committing like a mental suicide rather than like a physical suicide of like pointing a gun to your head. She's pointing her remote to her head as a threat to erase all of the stress and anxiety that she's been building up to that point. And it was just a really interesting analogy that I thought was kind of witty on Kazuma-Kamachi's part. Later on, there is a scene between Saria, who, by the way, I was getting mixed up with Seiri. So there's a Seiri and a Saria. Seiri is Fukiyose. That's how I've always remembered her, as Fukiyose. I didn't even know her other name. But then Saria is the Kumakawa Saria. She's the sister of Maria, the maid in the yellow and black maid outfit, right? So, anyways, Saria is a character that I find myself liking more and more every single time that she appears. When she first appeared, I really was not interested in her at all. But every time that she does something now, I'm kind of, I don't know, she grows on me. Anyways, that's kind of besides the point. There's this one part where Shokuhou, when she finds out that her memories have been tampered with, or when she thinks that her memories are have been tampered with, she gets really angry, and it's so ironic. It's so ironic, and I love it. And this is probably some people hate about her. It's ironic that she gets angry because she has done the same thing to so many other people. Obviously, she's manipulated so many people for her own advantage, and it's kind of funny to see her like get a taste of her own medicine in a sense, or she believes that her memories were tampered with. It wasn't necessarily confirmed at the time, and I don't believe her memories actually were tampered with. It was really interesting how this volume kind of kept you on edge of if her memories were actually hers or not, were they authentic or not. It did really kind of have me sitting on the edge of my seat throughout the entire volume. I mean, I had kind of figured that they probably were her authentic memories, but they were playing around with the idea so much that, and knowing Cosmic Kamashi, I would not have been entirely surprised if they were tampered with, if that's the route that he was going to go down. Another aspect of Shokuhou that I really liked is that reading from Shokuhou's perspective is really interesting, because on the outside, she always comes off as being really confident and in control of any situation. But when you read from her perspective, you realize just how internally vulnerable and anxious she actually is. She's a very anxious character, which I really like that sort of that contrast from her internal and external attitude. That is actually kind of another comparison I could make to Lelouch. Lelouch definitely had his moments of frustration and anxiety and whatnot throughout the show, but he always kept up an outward, confident sort of appearance to everyone basically except for like C2. As I've kind of touched up on before, she has these like personal rules that she sets for herself with her remote. She'll actually apparently like take punishments for her actions in other bodies. Throughout this volume, I really just found myself impressed by all of the characterization of Shokuhou. She's just like far more thoughtful, like sentimental and anxious and like oddly responsible than I would have thought before. I mean, when you see her in Railgun, you kind of think that she'll just take advantage of anyone just without, feeling any sort of, without feeling an ounce of guilt. But here you can see that there's actually much more going on in her mind than Railgun probably would have led you to believe. There was just something so satisfying about getting a character like that, who really, like I said, did seem sort of condescending. And I think I described her personality as being kind of like elite, like she had like an elite sort of persona that she put on. And that's why it was so satisfying to see how vulnerable she actually was internally. There was this one piece of artwork from the volume where when she makes a discovery that gives her hope again that her memories of Toma actually were authentic, it's just, she does this like really cute giggle and she just lays down in complete like joy and relief at that. And it was so nice and satisfying to see. And it's something I feel like you don't really get to see from a lot of the other characters in this series. I actually want to make another comparison to another character kind of reminded me of something similar. I think of, now, honestly, I didn't like Overlord very much, but I found an interesting sort of comparison between her and Albedo. If you know who Albedo is, I feel like she's kind of more popular than Overlord itself. So maybe you do know her even if you haven't seen it. But I remember, I think like in episode 1 of Overlord, actually, Albedo is told that she was programmed to be in love with Ainz, and her reaction was she just didn't care. She didn't care. So she kept loving him anyways. But Shokuhou is kind of different. She desperately wants her memories to be authentic because Shokuhou does legitimately value the truth, which is something I just find pretty cool, a neat little sort of characterization to her. Maybe I'm reaching for too many details when talking about this volume. But there's another part that I thought was kind of interesting, is that, okay, so like Index and Railgun really do a great job of like making callbacks to each other. So there's this one line, and I'll put it on screen if I can remember when I'm editing this, where it says, Shokuhou reached into her bag, pulled out another remote, and threw it. In truth, Shokuhou had difficulty even throwing a plastic bottle in the trash. And there is a scene, a very specific scene, just a random short little scene in Railgun T, the Daihase art, in her backstory with Dolly, where she fails to throw a plastic bottle and a trash can in the corner of the room. And it's like, that's such a random little detail to make a callback to or whatever. I really like that about this series. It's such an insignificant thing, but hey, it's cool that they called back to it, I guess. Whatever, right? Anyways, to get closer to wrapping up this volume, because I talked about it longer than I thought I actually would, we have the introduction of Ayu, who I have to say I do quite like Ayu so far from what I know about her. And I did make the mistake, which, I mean, I guess you could call it a mistake, maybe not, of reading Astral Buddy before I had read this volume. And I didn't really understand much about Ayu and Astral Buddy as a result. So I do plan to actually go and reread Astral Buddy and then make a video on that. But Ayu's interesting just because of how direct of a contrast she is to Shokuhou, even to the degree that, even to the point where I'm pretty sure that Ayu is literally the rejected design of Shokuhou. Like, Shokuhou's original concept art was what we now know as Ayu, which I just find really interesting. That's such a funny thing to do. It's really meta, actually. As a character, Ayu, I just kind of pity her. I just kind of pity Ayu. They really hammered home just like how jealous and bitter she feels towards Shokuhou, because her existence has kind of just screwed over Ayu from the very beginning. Like, there's this little backstory where the researchers are trying to decide if they'll choose either Shokuhou or Ayu to train into developing into being a level 5, and they chose Shokuhou. Like, they didn't have the time and resources to make both of them level 5, so they just had to choose one, and they went with Shokuhou. And so that's our, like, literally, like, from birth or whatever. I think it was birth. I can't remember exactly. Actually, probably wasn't birth. Very early on, when they were kids, I think they chose Shokuhou over Ayu. And she's different from a lot of past main antagonists because she's driven by something like a lot more personal, and she's quite literally just going after Shokuhou because she hates Shokuhou. Compare that to like a lot of the other antagonists that we've had. Like, look at Othinus. That is Othinus's motivation was never anything like, it was never like personally targeting anyone in particular. Her goal was quite a large goal, and you could say that about a lot of the Gremlin characters. It kind of felt like no one was an antagonist just because they hated one individual person, right? Like I said with Othinus, and also like Olay Blueshake, were characters that were just trying to make very large scale changes to the world. Like, Olay Blueshake was trying to literally turn America into a theocracy, right? And compare that to Ayu. It's just like, yep, she hates Shokuhou and she just wants to destroy her. That's it. That's it. I kind of like that, though. Shokuhou and Ayu definitely have an interesting interaction during this whole ordeal. It's interesting because, like, they've never even apparently met face to face before. Yet Ayu feels so bitter towards her. And when she kind of explains her position, it turns into a debate, and Shokuhou is literally just Ben Shapiro at this point. She says this one line: "Your success was stolen from you. You had talent, but you weren't placed on the proper stage. You can find similar situations anywhere you look. Competing in the exact same environment and under the exact same conditions is something you only see in the lukewarm miniature gardens adults prepare for children. That only applies to school tests that have no bearing on your actual life." And then in another quote she says, this one's kind of long, so sorry if you don't want to hear it, but it's human nature that leads us to win regardless. If doing everything right isn't enough to win, the winners will work 2 or even 3 times as hard. They'll show off what they can do with a method no one else had thought of. That's what leads to to the incident athlete who trained by running through the wasteland defeats the elite athlete who trained in a cutting-edge gym. If you want to reach space, you make your way to a realistic launch pad, even if it means leaving your home country. When adults fight, it comes down to a conflict between adults with childlike looks in their eyes as they work to both stay true to the type of race their predecessors established and also to produce shocking results that completely overturn those expectations. And then she goes on to reference Toma as an older boy who stuck to his own path without rotting despite being a level 0, and kind of contrasts that to her situation where she refers to herself as an all too pathetic level 5, and how Toma has essentially surpassed her in many ways. And then I love this. I love this so much. Shokuhou says, "You are weak. From the moment you could only use your life as an excuse for committing crimes, you insulted that very life. You didn't notice, you were afraid of noticing, and you went around destroying everything that could make you notice. But you have also crushed your ability to ever gather respect, even if you manage to reach the position of a level 5. I love this so much. I can't express how much I love this speech from Shokuhou. To put this into layman's terms, Shokuhou is essentially just saying that in life you're dealt a certain hand and it's not always going to be the best hand. You may not be born off with as much talent or resources or as great of a situation as people around you. If you ever want to make something of your life, or if you ever want the respect of the people around you, then you can't use your poor situation as an excuse. Your actions absolutely do matter in terms of ever finding any success or ever gaining respect of the people around you. Because simply no one is going to accept your excuses for why you're a bum or why you're a terrible, bitter person or why you commit crimes or anything like that. It is extremely easy to just simply shift all the blame to the system that set you down a specific path from the start, but in the end it's really you should be blaming for not overcoming it regardless. And succumbing to your own bitterness and shifting the blame for your situation is essentially the same as throwing away the one chance that you ever had at improving, is how that's basically what I got from all of this. This was a speech I was not expecting from Shokuhou ever, but I really loved it. I really loved the message of it. I think it's something that's largely lost in today's culture, where everyone kind of just wants to blame the system for setting them up for failure, and they use that as an excuse for why they don't have to try to actually improve themselves, or why they don't have to try to overcome anything. Oh, the system is against me, so what am I supposed to do? I should just give up, right? And so that's how I interpreted all this. And I don't know, I thought it was an oddly relevant message for certain circumstances in the world today. And no one is ever going to say that overcoming those things is easy by any stretch of the imagination. Obviously, it is not, if the system truly is, rigged against you. And it is definitely possible that your efforts may be wasted, but even if your efforts are in vain, do you think people will have more respect for you for being slothful and just giving in to the supposed rigged system and giving up? Or are people going to respect the person that actually attempts to overcome it through their own personal decision making in spite of everything that was against them? It's just some food for thought. It's just some food for thought, all right? Anyways, then we find out that Ayu was supposed to be saved. Essentially, she's supposed to be saved by Toma, and she was not. Toma did not show up, and she attempted suicide, but she didn't die. So she's still here, at least. That's cool. I don't want Ayu to be dead. So during their fight, Ayu and Shokuhou start talking about Toma, right? And Ayu straight up says to Shokuhou, "No help is coming," and then the next line is just Shokuhou saying, "Yes, it is," with the little star thing that she always does. And I wrote in my notes, this is literally the crying Soyjack. No, you can't just insert whatever here, and then like the Chad yes meme. It's literally that, but with Ayu and Shokuhou. If that someone has to have made that already. surely someone made that already. It fit that format so perfectly. I wanted to make that meme. And then guess what happens? Oh, Toma shows up, and then there's this art of Toma where his arm is like really like twisted looking, like it's twisting at an angle that I don't think is humanly possible. And I'm pretty sure I saw a meme, like a built different meme using that art before I'd even read this volume. So that was cool. Anyways, I talked about this volume way longer than I thought I would, so I'm gonna try to not talk about the next ones for too long. But just to wrap up my general thoughts of what I thought about this volume, I loved it. It's actually, I would say, one of my favorite volumes. Shokuhou is just a super interesting character. She's probably, like I said, she's probably my second favorite character in the series. Probably in terms purely talking about how she's written, she might actually be my favorite. But I think there's more to picking favorite characters than just like, oh, who do I think is written the best, right? She falls in line with what I just really value in a character. I love characters that are internally very different than they are from their outward sort of persona. That sort of contrast is something that I always like to see in a character. I really loved how she acts so like high and mighty and proud and even arrogant in many cases. But like I said, she is very vulnerable and anxious. She's very feminine on the inside, which is something that was really, really pleasant to read, made for a pleasant reading experience. In essence, I just found her to be a very layered sort of character and far more thoughtful than I ever would have thought at first. Besides her, I loved Ayu. I thought she was well thought out and actually a very tragic character in many regards. I mean, she really did go as far. I kind of undermined it, I think, when I was talking about it earlier, but she really did go as far as to attempt suicide. So, yeah, that got kind of dark. She is someone that was screwed over in life, and she just made it worse by shifting the blame towards others and drowning in her own jealousy and bitterness. I think Kazuma Kamachi did a good job of justifying her hatred of Shokuhou as well. I'm actually pretty excited to read more of her material again. I know Biohacker is supposedly got a lot of, it's supposedly about Ayu, which I've heard mixed things about. I've heard some people say they really liked it, and then other people say they didn't really like it. And I'm also really interested to go back to Astral Buddy and see what I think of her now that I kind of know more about her character. And last thing I'll say about it is, again, I just liked how much more of a personal story. Everything about this volume was so personal, from Shokuhou and her like personal feelings towards Toma, and Ayu and her personal hatred and jealousy and envy of Shokuhou. Everything was driven by something extremely personal. There was nothing really too like larger than life in this volume, and I thought it contrasted well from the last arc, with the Oathness arc that we just got done with. Anyways, New Testament 12. Jeez, this is going to be a long video. I don't want to talk about this volume as long. I just had a lot to say about Shokuhou, all right? New Testament 12. All right, the very first thing I'm going to say is that I noticed an issue. That in New Testament 12, if you look at Nephthys in the art, her left eye is like a greenish blue or whatever, and her right eye is orange, but the eye color is flipped in New Testament 13. I don't know. That was just something I noticed. Is there any explanation for that, for why the eye color got swapped or whatever? I don't know. Anyways, Nephthys, she's a looker. She's a looker. All right. I always have to praise I always have to praise Himura's art. Kiyotaka Himura. Himura has some of the greatest character designs ever. I could make a video about the character designs in this series. I love the way he designs characters. That's just one of my favorite things about this series. This series, Toaru by far has my favorite character designs. Not even close. I'll go ahead and warn you here that I can't decide if I want to refer to Saint Germain as he or she, because in the volume art, it's Saint Germain is shown as as female, but the very first time you see Saint Germain, he's a guy. So I got early on to the volume, I got really used to calling him he or whatever, and so for some reason my brain just wants to say he. I think it's because Saint Germain is actually a guy, like in real life or whatever, the legend of Saint Germain, and so I just kind of want to refer to him as he. I'm even saying him right now, even though At the end, you see Saint Germain mostly like in the female form, but it's whatever. I will say, I think this volume did start off pretty slow, but it definitely built up into something really interesting. And Saint Germain ended up being quite the tricky little character, you could say. We see the more of the magic gods that were shown off in at the end of, I think it was New Testament 10, at the end of the Othinus arc. We got to see this conversation between these magic gods, and I think Aleister Crowley as well. And I actually forgot to mention that in my video. Apparently, it took me such a long time to record that video. I was just like, my brain was fried. But interestingly enough, they pretty much say that if they just walked out into the world as is, they would have just shattered it just by simply stepping into the world from that outside of that distorted phase that they're in. And so they had to do some weird trickery thing where they essentially like split up their power by infinity or something just crazy. I don't know, but it like they're strong. That's the point I'm trying to make. They're strong. I don't want to talk about this volume too long. And I actually kind of feel like I don't really have a lot to say about it. I did very much so enjoy it, but I don't feel like I actually have a lot to say. But anyways, I'll try to keep it a little bit shorter. So one of the most important characters from this volume is quote unquote Aihana Etsu. It's not actually Aihana Etsu. It's I forgot his full name, but I think his name's like Kano or something like that. He's a femboy, bro. He looks like a girl. I thought he was a girl at first when I first saw the art, but no, he's a boy. He's just a femboy, right? So, I actually found him. I know I just called him a femboy, and I'm about to say this, but I found him kind of relatable, not because he is a femboy, I swear. But he's a very sensitive character, and a large part of this volume is him overcoming his sort of like cowardly persona, not persona, his cowardly personality. And I don't know, when I was younger, I was actually quite sensitive myself. So I kind of admired seeing a character who was kind of like that, very fragile and very quick to cry, right? And to see him go through what is essentially like the hero's journey. And we get to see him just simply confront his own weaknesses for the sake of finding out the truth about his friend, believe it or not, Frenda, right? Who was someone that gave him a lot of advice in the past, and he has not seen from her, heard from her at all lately. So he goes on a mission to find out what happened to her. On that note, I actually want to talk about Frenda a bit, because I've always liked how Frenda has been used in Tuaru. I really like how Frenda has left behind this sort of legacy even after her death. Obviously, in Railgun, we got her little story with Saten that I thought was really touching, and I personally really loved that short little arc with her, Saten, and her fight with Yumiya Rako. But even now, we see Frenda's death has strongly impacted, I would say, not only Kano, but also Mugino as well, of course. And it's just interesting to see that this character that died in this really like sudden fashion, to the point where you would think that Friend is just a complete throwaway character if you were just watching Index, and then her character actually ends up having this impact on a lot of other characters later down the line, even after her death. I've always found interesting how Frenda has been used in the Tuaru series, not only in Index but in also obviously Railgun, and it's something I think that only Tuaru could really do with a character in this fashion. And I'll be real, bro, I just miss her. I miss Frenda. I loved Frenda. Anyways, we learned that Frenda fulfilled this very encouraging sort of almost role model-esque role for Kano, and she would often try to give him advice. So, for example, obviously, like I said already, Kano is quite the sensitive sort of crybaby sort of character, right? And Frenda pretty much told him that he shouldn't view that as such a negative thing. She said that because he's so sensitive, he'll be able to share the pain and empathize with others who are going through conflict, that he could cry for them. And that's something that Frenda wasn't particularly able to do. Frenda was essentially a desensitized character because of her affiliation with the dark side and being a part of Item and whatnot. Someone who probably killed a bunch of people and just had to cut off her own emotions. So it was a really interesting sort of relationship that she had with Kano in that sense. Generally, I think that was really just one of the highlights for me of this volume, was just learning about Frenda, learning about not only Frenda's relationship with Kano, but I'll kind of skip around here from this volume. I'm not going to go, from like beginning to end or anything in order of events, nothing like that. We learned that Frenda had this like secret vault where she had a lot of friends. Maybe that's why her name was Friend. Haha. Okay, sorry. But she had like a ton of friends and connections, right? Like just way too many. And she would collect presents there, essentially, because she still valued those relationships that we had with people. And it was where she could be, this vault was a place where she could kind of be vulnerable in that sense. So in this vault, she had this calendar of all of her friends or connections, like birthdays or whatever. And I think it said that there were more days marked on the calendar than not, meaning that like she was buying presents for people like every other day, basically, and sending them messages and stuff. And they were actually like genuine, heartfelt messages from Frenda. And I thought it was a really touching thing to learn about her character. And of course, Kano did actually have a present from Frenda that came with a message from her and whatnot, like a voice recorded message from her. And it is quite the heartwarming little message. She says, I'll quote this, I'll put it on the screen as well. "In the end, you insult yourself and call yourself a crybaby, but it's not going to end that way. I'm not some kind of benevolent person, I'm not trying to get along with all 6 billion people out there. You're one of the friends that I, the great Frenda, chose and approved of. I think that's something you can be proud of." That's pretty cute. And then she says, "Your tears are like a safety lock from your common sense. They'll make sure you don't stray from the proper path, no matter how unreasonable the obstacle. That's something I don't have, so I respect you for having something I could never reach. There are so many people that will end up doing awful things so easily, but your strength will never allow that. So be proud. In the end, you can be proud of having the strength to cry and forgive anything." I don't know, it's sappy, it's corny, but I kind of like it, all right? To talk a little bit more about Kano Shinka is his name, by the way. To talk more about Kano's, kind of what happened to him throughout this volume. He was essentially just manipulated by Saint Germain, who I will talk about more, obviously, in a second. I'm kind of just getting Kano's stuff out of the way. But he was obviously, his anger of discovering what happened to Frenda, someone that was really close to him, or someone that he looked up to greatly, really appreciated in his life. When he found out what happened to her, he was extremely thirsty for revenge as a result of being manipulated by Saint Germain and whatnot. And so a lot of this was him coming to terms with what happened to Frenda and essentially forgiving Mugino. After he overcame those, bitter feelings and desire for revenge as a result of listening to the birthday message from Frenda, there's this really, corny but cool little line. It says, "The boy became a man. He was Kano Shinka and no one else." This is pretty much, I interpret it as him accepting his identity and beginning to look forward in life. And he now understands the value that he holds as an empathetic person, which not everyone can claim to be. And that is a wonderful strength to have. Being a legitimately empathetic person is very much so not easy. And I'd say it's even harder for men, especially. But yeah, I could talk more about Kano as a character, but I really want to get through this volume a little bit quicker, so I'll move on. Something that I was not expecting to see in this volume was a fight between Toma and Hamazura. I thought that was pretty cool. Toma kind of looked at Hamazura as someone that kind of represented his past self. It was interesting that they had like a sort of conflict of goals and whatnot. It was just a cool little thing I liked about this volume. Of the 3 protagonists, Toma, Accelerated, and Hamazura, Toma and Hamazura are definitely the most similar, but they do still have some like subtle differences, of course, and obviously some not so subtle differences. But there was this plan that Toma had on essentially letting Kano beat him up until he was okay and ready to move forward, whereas Hamazura said that declared himself as not being so benevolent and doesn't believe Toma should have to go through that, considering that it was really Hamazura that was partially responsible for not saving Frenda. At least he kind of blamed himself. If you remember back on during Battle Royale, he was there when Mugino went haywire. Before I move on to talking about Saint Germain and some of the bigger points of this volume, I guess I'll point out a few just random things about this. Bro, I just find Mugino and Kinohara together funny. So they had this argument about this 24-hour experimental movie that Kinohara was wanting to watch, and then I don't know why. Kinohara is, for some reason, one of the most enjoyable characters in the series to me, and it's for the most shallow reasoning ever. It's just like, oh, she says super a lot. It's funny. She said super for the 13,000th time, and it's 13,000 times funnier now. I laugh every time she says it. I can't help it. I love when she says super in every sentence. I don't know why. I should be sick and tired of it by this point. But every time she says super, I giggle a little bit. It's the dumbest thing that I just enjoy. Why do I enjoy Kinohara putting the word super into every single sentence? I don't know. You could even say it's a lazy character I enjoy. I don't care because it's funny. And it's also funny how she just likes garbage movies. Who's going to watch a 24-hour experimental film? That sounds terrible. I'd watch it with her. Anyway, and then also Mugino. Mugino's hilarious. She just like starts blasting away at walls in this mall, like without a care in the world, just to like fix a problem or whatever. And she just doesn't even think twice about it. And she's just pathologically insane. But you know what? That's why we love her. That's why we love Mugino. Both of them together just have really funny dialogue. And then I'll point out, just because I have it in my notes, but I wrote that I really wish Takitsubo would wear something else. Dude, Takitsubo would be so much more attractive if she just did not wear that stupid, ugly pink tracksuit. Like, please, please, Haimura, draw her in something else, please. I don't understand. The other item girls got different outfits, but Takitsubo didn't. Anyways, let's move on to talking about Saint Germain. I'll be real, Saint Germain is a really kind of confusing character to talk about, and it's entirely on purpose. Saint Germain is just like a giant contradiction, and Saint Germain is just essentially incoherent, and it's completely on purpose, and it makes total sense why he actually is incoherent. Or maybe inconsistent is the better word. Everything about him is entirely inconsistent. And as I was reading this volume, I kept thinking that there was just going to be this moment where Saint Germain revealed like his motivation or his plan or something, and then, oh man, everything makes sense now. No, nothing made sense. Nothing made sense about Saint Germain's plan, and it was on purpose because of the nature of who Saint Germain actually is. So where Saint Germain is actually derived from is pretty interesting. It's from this legend of this immortal man who has basically been seen periodically throughout history. He seems like this like immortal alchemist or whatever. There's a lot of different things about Saint Germain that I could talk about. I watched a short little video kind of discussing the legend of Saint Germain and all the random little details about him. I'm not going to go into all of that here. There's videos you can watch on that and stuff, obviously. But Saint Germain is almost kind of, and it was never actually fully revealed, by the way. Even in the afterword, Kazuma Kamachi did not reveal. He actually said that he purposely didn't reveal what the true nature of Saint Germain was, whether he was a virus or a magician or what, and he wanted to leave that mystery there. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So I kind of viewed Saint Germain more as a virus, because something interesting about Saint Germain is that he was there during the Othinus arc, when all the different phases were being, when the world was essentially being recreated over and over again by Othinus. He apparently witnessed it firsthand. And to me, and the way the magic gods had talked about Saint Germain in this volume, they described him more as a virus, something that is just always there. Saint Germain always somehow appears at any point in the world. But the whole catch with Saint Germain is that I think it's easiest to describe him as a virus, like I said. So anyone can become Saint Germain, and essentially, in this volume in particular, you can see tons of different Saint Germains. They all wear the same outfit, but they look entirely different. And any one of them any random person can be turned into Saint Germain, supposedly. So you get all of these different people with conflicting pasts and beliefs and thoughts and everything like that. There's nothing consistent about everyone that does become Saint Germain, other than the fact that they supposedly become Saint Germain, and that means that Saint Germain is essentially has like an identity crisis, because there is no one true Saint Germain. Despite all the theatrical sort of way of speaking that Saint Germain has throughout the volume, you always get this feeling that Saint Germain is about to reveal something huge, right? But then you find out it's actually inconsistent on purpose, right? And so, like, because of the nature of Saint Germain, his / her, whatever, stances, objectives, morality change constantly, because there is literally no foundation. There is absolutely no consistency. And she, whatever. In my notes, I literally kept switching between he and she. So that's why I keep, doing that. But he essentially is role-playing in a sad attempt to create, like, a true self or something like that. It's very bizarre, and it's honestly kind of sad. I could make a comparison to the message of Saint Germain's character and the message of Perfect Blue. If you've ever seen the 90s psychological horror movie Perfect Blue, I really love that movie, and it's actually kind of about something similar. It's about this woman who... she's like a celebrity, essentially, and she develops this sort of like celebrity personality, and it's kind of separate from the real her, really truly is. And it's a whole like commentary on what defines who you really are when you're this sort of like accumulation of different aliases and people know you for different things. And it's a message that's more like important in the digital age, considering where we have like social media and we can create all these different aliases we want, and we may act different and present ourselves in different ways on all of these different profiles and whatnot, and all these different websites on the internet, that we kind of lose track of who we really are. And Super Eye Patch Wolf actually made a great video explaining that concept far better than I could explain it here. But it was just a little interesting sort of similar message I got out of that. I always like to, in these videos, I always like to make comparisons to things that I see in other anime and stuff, because, I don't know, I think it makes it a little bit more fun. If you couldn't tell by now, theming and messaging is one of my favorite aspects of fiction, I guess, in this case, anime, manga, and light novels and stuff. I'm typically more impacted by a story that talks about a subject like that I'm really interested in, or that I can relate to in some way, or that I just find fascinating, or that I find just like relevant in the modern world. It's something I always try to point out as I'm talking about these volumes, just because there's a lot that I think the authors put in. I think most of the time an author writes a story with a specific message in mind to get across, obviously, that sometimes doesn't always get through. And sometimes things are left for interpretation, and sometimes I probably end up actually interpreting the wrong message, or interpreting messages that weren't really there in the first place, or might just accidentally be there. But it's something that I really enjoy talking about and thinking about whenever I consume any series, really. So that's why I always kind of like to bring stuff like that up, and I make comparisons to different series and shows and whatnot. Anyways, I got kind of sidetracked with that. Let's go back to talking about Saint Germain. Generally, I just think Saint Germain was a really subversive and bizarre antagonist, way different than anyone we've seen up until this point. And I actually felt a lot of pity for Saint Germain. I even wrote in my notes that I can't even view Saint Germain as really being fully human either. I will say it's kind of a shame that Saint Germain was essentially role-playing or LARPing or whatever this whole time, because Saint Germain actually brought up like a lot of interesting ideas and stuff that unfortunately I guess is kind of just like invalidated in a way, because it's like, oh, well, that wasn't Saint Germain's actual perspective. He was just saying that. He was just saying that to look cool. But I mean, he talked about like he seemed like very dedicated towards fulfilling his dream, despite any backlash, harassment, or ridicule that she received from. My notes are insane, dude. I keep switching between he and she. That he received from others. He also acknowledged that having infinite power was not fulfilling in any was not particularly fulfilling, and that's why he was approaching Kano in the first place, was to make Kano a sort of king figure for Saint Germain to serve. And then he made some interesting statements about like magic gods being arrogant sort of counselors that don't serve any sort of king. And it was all sort of tied back to this comparison of forgot his name. It was King Arthur's greatest knight. Like everyone knows the story about King Arthur and Excalibur, right? And essentially it seemed like his perspective was that those with power should not become the king necessarily, but should serve the king that can lead better than them. And they serve as this sort of like, you know, right-hand man to the king that protects them and advises them and whatnot. It was kind of interesting to see why he hated magic gods. It was a weird sort of like argument of like hierarchy, the necessity of hierarchy. It seemed to be his whole point, which now it kind of makes me sad, because it was like a really interesting discussion, but then it turned out I was like, oh, you're just role playing. You didn't actually believe any of that. You just wanted to role play. Maybe I'm misinterpreting this. I don't know. It's really strange to have this antagonist that says so many interesting things, like kind of philosophical things, and then you find out that, oh, he's just role playing. Yep, he's just role playing. It's like, oh, what should I think about all this stuff I just read then? Is it really just nonsense? I mean, you can definitely get valuable messages out of what Saint Germain is saying. It's like some things that he said I agree with, and other things he said I disagree with. So it's like, it's kind of strange, because it's like the message is still there and I'm reading it and consuming it and I'm thinking about it. It's still thought provoking, but then I find out that this character was being, it was all just baloney. Apparently this character wasn't actually saying anything that came from a genuine place. Anyways, it's interesting stuff to think about, I guess. I should probably move on. I'll say a few more things about New Testament 12. There was this one moment that I really liked where Stephanie Gorgeous Palace, best name ever, risked her life to protect Hamazura. And her reasoning, it was such a short part of the volume, but I found it kind of touching. Her reasoning was that she used to be a teacher, and she just felt like an innate need to protect children. And I just like, oh, that's a nice little addition. That's kind of nice. My mom actually used to be a teacher, and so I don't know, whenever there's like discussions about stuff like that, I'm like, oh, that's kind of nice. It's kind of interesting. I kind of have a soft spot for that in my heart, for, little things like that. There was this really neat little part of the volume where we actually kind of get a little bit of an origin story of the Kiharas and how they were actually pretty normal. And through the constant fixation on scientific advancement, they began to just despair, and they pretty much lost their humanity, and they became insane because of it, which I thought was a pretty interesting. And I always kind of wonder that, like, why are the Kiharas just so messed up in the head? It's like, oh, well, that's why. That kind of makes sense. Who would have guessed that taking advantage of everyone and everything around you for the mere sake of scientific advancement would make you lose your sense of humanity? Oh, who would have thought? Another random little thing in here, actually in the afterword, which I don't always talk about in these videos, but Kazuma Kamchi said that he created Frenda Savaloon in Old Testament 15, which is a Battle Royale arc, which I have actually read, by the way. I haven't read all of New Testament, but I have read that volume in particular. He said he asked Hymera to make Frenda so extremely cute that no one would immediately expect her to die. And then she became one of the most popular characters. I thought that was kind of funny. I want to mention the final fight and how much of a nerd, an absolute nerd, Kazuma Kamachi is. So there's this weird thing about where, like, Saint Germain was making enemies out of plant cells because plant cells are actually stronger than animal cells. Like, okay, dork. Who on earth writes... Who writes enemies like that? It's like, oh, they're made of plant cells. Watch out. It was so weird. It's like, what a nerd. Kazuma Kamachi he's the nerdiest Chad. He's, you know, Kazuma Kamachi, he's on that Sigma grind set, you could say. So you know what? I give him a pass. I read the epilogue of this volume while listening to this creepy piano song from Persona 4, and for some reason I felt the need to write that in my notes. It's like, okay, maybe I'll play it here if I can remember. I don't know why, but it was just one of those songs that I've always thought was kind of corny and kind of funny whenever I heard it, but it actually sets the mood really well. And especially for some reason when I was reading this epilogue, I thought it was really fitting. I don't even remember exactly what was in the epilogue, but I don't know. That's something I did, I guess. Anyways, just general thoughts. New Testament 12, it's a bizarre volume. It's a really weird volume, and it's kind of slow, but you know, it did become something really interesting, and I actually did quite like this volume overall. You know what? There haven't been any volumes so far that I have even really come close to disliking outside of New Testament 1. And like I've said, I did generally like New Testament 1. I just thought the action scenes were boring in that volume. Really, like New Testament has just been really consistent so far. I've enjoyed everything quite a lot. And so, you know what? Let's just go into New Testament 13. I apologize for how long this video is apparently going to be. I didn't think it would be this long. Testament 13, this volume went in a really different direction than I was expecting. You gotta love how big of a deal they made of the concept of a magic god leading up to Othinus, and then, oh, now we have just like 3 magic gods. Technically 4? I was so confused because I thought there's technically 4 magic gods. That they introduce here. There's High Priest, Nephthys, Nyang Yang, which I hope I'm saying that correct. Nyang Yang? Is that how you say it? Nyang Yang, I guess. And then there's Zombie, which I thought that Zombie was Nyang Yang because she's so like pale, I guess, that I thought she kind of looked like a zombie, and there was no art showing Zombie. So it was really bizarre to learn that, oh no, Zombie was a magic god. And it's come entirely separate from Yang Yang, and like he just died. He just died like as soon as they got to Academy City, because Aleister freaking Crowley is a bit of a mad lad. Anyways, the majority of this volume is pretty much High Priest and Toma in this conflict, where High Priest is trying to convince Toma to become what is essentially their scorer for the magic gods. So basically the magic gods, they're so powerful that they affect the real world no matter what they do. Whenever they have like petty squabbles or whatever, it actually affects reality in some way. It's kind of bizarre. They didn't really give a lot of great examples in the volume of what exactly he meant by that. And honestly, I found the way that High Priest was talking was kind of hard to comprehend what on earth he actually meant, because he kept saying he wanted Toma to be the scorer or whatever, and it's like, what do you mean by that? I didn't understand what exactly Toma was supposed to do necessarily, but he was essentially promised, like, I guess you could say, guaranteed answered prayers. So essentially whatever Toma wanted would have been granted to him had he gone with High Priest's request. And this seemed to be testing Toma in his convictions from the Oathness arc, where in the Oathness arc he saw the perfect world that she had created, and he thought there was no way that he could ever compete against something like that. He could never achieve something so beautiful and so perfect. And then, of course, if you remember, he had that whole conversation with the will of the Misaka Network and Mikoto herself about the negative consequences of a quote-unquote perfect world. So Toma is pretty adamant about rejecting this offer, and then they go on this big chase around Academy City. And I'm going to go ahead and talk about one of my favorite parts of this volume was just Fuyama, the Chad. I didn't know how much I liked Fuyama until this volume, apparently. I still haven't read World War III. I've only seen the anime. I know, laugh at me, spit on me, right? I'm going to read Old Testament, all right? But for some reason, when Fuyama, as High Priest was chasing Toma throughout this volume, and Fuyama, the Chad, shows up out of nowhere and says, bro, go to District whatever, Central Park, I will be there. I got the fairy spell. High Priest, he's done. He's done. I will destroy him. And I was like, oh, dude, he's such a Chad. He's so cool. Oh, I don't know why. I got like really giddy when that happened. When I was reading that, I got really pumped. I was super excited. And then rest in peace, Fuyama. I don't know if he's actually dead. They didn't confirm in the volume if he was dead or not. I would assume he's not dead, but I could be entirely wrong. But essentially, Toma gets there, and then Fuyama uses the fairy spell in like 2 million plus times or something crazy like that. And it's basically like his last sort of attempt at atoning for what he did in World War III. And it doesn't work. Surprise, surprise, it didn't work. Oh man, you couldn't beat High Priest by chapter 2? Crazy. Who would have guessed? It was still cool though. It was still cool. And Fuyama, he's good in my books. One thing I want to point out that happened earlier was that High Priest, he's a little bit of a jokester. He's a little bit of a prankster. He put this letter in Toma's locker or whatever, asking him to go to the roof or whatever. And then he gaslit Toma into thinking that there was this quote-unquote observer that's always been around him and always been watching him and stuff. And he really sells it. He does a great job. Like, I was kind of buying it, right? And then, like, Toma thought about the headband girl. If you know the headband girl, she's like in the background of some art and like volume covers and stuff. And it's like a running gag. But I thought she was, for a second he got me. I was like, oh man, this girl is actually ended up being important. There's the random girl that's in the background of like the, what is it, New Testament 5, I think? The New Testament 5 artwork. Are you serious? No, he was just joking. I don't know why I thought that was really funny. But back to the conflict, I was kind of wondering, I kind of wondered if Toma would have accepted High Priest's offer if he offered it before New Testament 9. Because in New Testament 9, obviously he saw this perfect world. It took that conversation they had with the will of the Misaka Network to, realize the actual negative consequences of that so-called perfect world. So I wondered, would he have actually accepted his offer if this took place before New Testament 9? Food for thought, right? To talk more about High Priest, though, High Priest was a little strange reading a lot of his parts, because a lot of his character was talking about like Buddhism, and well, hey, I don't know much about Buddhism, unfortunately. I mean, I know the basic concept of reincarnation, but I don't know how accurate a lot of the descriptions of the ceremonies were in this volume to, like, the actual practicing religion of Buddhism and whatnot. But I found it interesting to read nevertheless. It was kind of interesting to see Kazuma Kamashi talk about like the politics of the self-mummification process or ceremony to reach Buddhahood. So when High Priest was attempting to reach Buddhahood, essentially the self-mummification ceremony is like you're basically buried alive in a coffin or whatever underground. And you have to reject your human instincts to feel like fear and panic and all these different natural emotions that any human would feel if they were, buried alive. And they're supposed to have like complete faith in whatever the heck, like retain this sense of complete calmness, so that when you do die, you die like peacefully and you enter what is called Buddhahood. But the catch is that after you've died, other people, the nobles or whatever, the inspectors have to inspect your body after you've died to see if they approve of of the self-mummification or whatnot. And so there was a lot of like jealousy against High Priest in his time of being alive. And so they found any reason they possibly could to reject or deny him from reaching Buddhahood, which is a necessary step to reach Buddhahood. They not only do you have to reach Buddhahood like by earning it yourself, but other people have to acknowledge it basically unanimously. And it's like, oh, well, how do you think that's gonna work? Obviously not well. They just made up reasons for why he failed the ceremony. And so that's how he ended up becoming a magic god, was by taking all of the necessary steps to achieve Buddhahood, but you're rejected by the third party, which I just thought was really interesting. If anyone in the comments happens to be knowledgeable about Buddhism, is this a real thing in Buddhism? Is self-mummification? Well, I guess I could look it up, but I've never heard of self-mummification. I've never heard of it. Is that an actual thing where supposedly to reach Buddhahood, you have to have people approve of your corpse, essentially? It's really strange, I thought. But I'd be really interested to know how accurate that actually is to, the official religion of Buddhism. Regardless, I think I should say that I don't feel like I fully understand what High Priest's character was fully about, necessarily. He supposedly, even after all this time, genuinely still wanted to save people, but maybe it went over my head in what way he wanted to save them exactly. I guess I didn't really have a good understanding of what his worldview really even was by the end of the volume. I will say I definitely enjoyed his character, and I enjoyed his sort of bluntness and the way that he spoke, especially later on when he started ranting about Mikoto, which was I'll get into later. But I don't know, maybe if you guys in the comments can help me. What exactly did I miss with High Priest? Was there something that went over my head? Anyways, moving on, there was this one sort of, I guess, like side plot that was going on this whole time in this volume that was actually probably one of my favorite parts of the volume, and it was with the Akikawa family. Akikawa Mie, she was like this middle school girl, and her mom was a jeweler, and her dad was like a vault designer or something like that. And it was really interesting because I always love stories that kind of discuss like father-daughter relationships. I don't know why, it's just something I find really interesting and kind of touching or heartwarming every single time. It's definitely something that I've seen in other shows. Like one that pops in my mind was this one anime by, I think, like Key Studios, right? If you know the people that make Clanad and Charlotte and Angel Beats, they made another anime called, what was the name of it? The Day I Became a God. And it was like there was this one about this girl and her like troubled sort of relationship with her father after their mother had passed, and it was a super touching little story that they had to tell. And there's one episode in particular, I think it was like episode 6 or something, hit really hard. And then I kind of discovered, I just really like when anime talks about father-daughter relationships. I guess it's something that I think is really important, that is just not discussed in anime all that often, because anime doesn't really talk about like parental relationships all that often, which I really wish would change because I kind of like stuff like that. And so while I was reading this, it kind of made me think of that. So Mie, she thinks that her dad is pretty much just lame, like a lot of middle schoolers probably think. And her mother in particular, like she's way more successful. She makes more money than her father. and she works on like, you know, this cool like jewelry stuff that's like super expensive. And it's like they've even discovered like cutting edge sort of stuff, like this stuff called liquid diamond, right? And it's like, it seems like a really exciting sort of career field. And then she looks at her dad and is like, oh, he makes less money than my mom, and he builds vaults and stuff. And she sees her dad at work while she's bringing his lunch to him, and he's like bowing down, apologizing to his boss on the phone for something that something that wasn't even his fault, because, you know, work culture and stuff, right? And so she views her dad as just kind of being lame, and she has this really nice conversation with her mother about it. And there was this nice little metaphor that was made about the two's relationship, and it's the fact that the mom makes jewelry that is stored in the father's vault. And his mother gave this nice sort of explanation that she pretty much had abandoned all sense of materialism, and it was all as a result of her appreciation for her husband. She started to view jewelry as something just legitimately meaningless. And she even talks about that to Mie. She says that this jewelry doesn't have any actual value, really. It only has value because we give it value. It's not because it's rare necessarily. It's because, well, it looks pretty and we can sell it for a high price. And she views it all as kind of meaningless in comparison to her relationship with her husband and her family. And it's something that she holds as being far more valuable. And it's just, I don't know why. I just love stuff like that. It was really touching. I really like, you know, just family messages and stuff like that, and anime and manga and light novels and stuff. I really enjoyed this whole family relationship thing they had going on throughout the entire volume, and kind of touched by the story. When the building is flipped over that she's in by High Priest, the liquid diamond that I mentioned earlier was, you know, slipping out of the, you know, it was opened up in the vault, like everyone had access to it and wanted to steal it because it's liquid diamond and it's worth like way too much money. And so because she viewed it as being an important symbol between her mother and father, Mie decided to steal the liquid diamond herself and bring it to her mother. And then she gets trapped up in this whole situation where these guys who also want the liquid diamond, you can see where this is going. And they kind of like confronted her or whatnot. They were gonna like shoot her or whatever. One guy had a gun or something and was threatening her to hand over the liquid diamond. And then like an anti-skill guy, and then just the Chad that her dad is, came in and punched him, right? Shocked him in the face. And it was just a cool moment where Mie got to see her dad being cool for once. And it was just, I don't know why. I love stuff like that. Maybe I'm weird. I feel like most people probably read this and were bored because it's like, oh, I wanna read about the magic god, you know? And it's like, hey, that's a fair opinion because the magic gods are really cool. But I don't know. I just find myself really liking little stories like that. And I think Cosmic Comedy does a great job at writing these random little seemingly insignificant characters that are, you know, almost entirely separated from the main plot of the volume. But hey, I thought it was touching and interesting nevertheless, right? As much as I really love just the super grandiose, like mind-blowing universal stuff that happens in Index, I also like just the really personal things that are kind of just personally more relevant a lot as well. So I don't know, I guess maybe that was maybe I'm thinking about this now actually, maybe that was actually on purpose. Maybe Cosmic Comedy was like, hey, let me write these two stories where one is about this random middle school girl and her family issues or whatever, and then let me write this other plot where this magic god who can literally like destroy the world instantly is chasing Toma around. Right? I like that contrast personally. Anyways, let's talk about Mikoto. I'm gonna try to make this quick, but let's see. I wrote my notes that Akikawa Mie, she was actually saved by Mikoto technically, and I kind of wrote a little thing about that. I really liked how we got to see this story from the perspective of someone that was saved by, you know, one of the main characters. It's like You know when you watch a hero movie and you see, like, I don't know, Spider-Man saves some random kid that's gonna get hit by a car because his ball got, you know, thrown into the middle of the street, and Spider-Man saves him. It's like, okay, that's cool, but it's just like a random sort of thing that happens and you just kind of forget about it. But this was kind of a neat situation where it's like, oh, Mikoto saved this girl in this building, and now we get to see the girl who was saved. We get to see her perspective of the story from here on out in this separate sort of storyline that ties in a weird sort of way. I thought was kind of cool. Apart from that, in regards to Mikoto's character, she, in this volume, is going through that very typical thing that you see shonen female characters go through. And I know Index is not a shonen, but it is similar-ish to a shonen, right? It's, I don't know. Some people may actually think it is a shonen. I don't think it is. But for some reason, every shonen feels the need to have a female character that goes through this arc where they feel useless to the main character. And it's a trope that I'm a little tired of seeing, but I actually think it was done better here than it was in, like, say, Naruto, right? With Sakura, if you remember that. So with Sakura from Naruto, she was essentially, and by the way, I actually don't hate Sakura though. I don't hate her as much as everyone else does. I think she's okay. I think she's fine. But I didn't think she was too interesting per se. But she was a character that felt kind of useless throughout the majority of the story. And it almost felt like it never really even went anywhere by the end of it. But I think in this case, in New Testament 13, it's a little bit more interesting. I mean, first and foremost, like, Mikoto is not a useless character. She's not useful in every scenario ever, but she's obviously not a useless character. I mean, you can look at her own dang series to see that she's not useless. And even in this volume, she does a number of things that do obviously help Toma. Like, she slowed down the High Priest with this, like, really cool, like, vacuum that she created. I can't explain exactly how she did it, but the explanation sounded pretty cool, right? And one of the coolest things ever, actually, is that they, at the very end of the volume, they straight up launch High Priest into space by Mikoto setting up this whole mass driver contraption thing that was really cool. Legit just launched him up to space. Now, he came back because, you know, Magic God BS literally fused with a comet or whatever, right? Because why not? But at the very least, she set up the kill for the freaking Kihara dog, which I forgot to mention up until this point. Up until this point, in my notes, I kept just writing Kihara dog over and over again in my notes. Like, I didn't say anything else about him pretty much. I just wrote Kihara dog. This dog is a magic god slayer. I was laughing. I was dying. I was dying at the thought of this Kihara dog slaying magic gods. It was so funny. Anyways, I can talk more about that later. Back to Mikoto. So it's like, I guess I am a little tired of the, oh, this female character feels useless sort of like story arc that happens, but I do think it was a little bit more well done here. We get some insight onto how Toma views Mikoto, which I thought was kind of interesting. He essentially, what I gathered was he describes Mikoto as someone whose very presence seems to help him. It felt as if he was describing Mikoto as someone who serves as a balance to himself. I'll just read what Toma actually says to High Priest. He says, it was because Misako was with me that I made it this far. She kept my trembling legs moving, supported my heart as the pressure bore down on it, and kept me in a position to make jokes. I survived this long because she was the one by my side. She saved my life, and you want me to tell her to back off because she's in the way? Who do you think you are? You don't understand the first thing about the human emotion of this world, but you're trying to act like some all-knowing god. And as Mikoto overhears this, she's pretty much conflicted because she's grateful that she's able to assist Toma in some way, but she isn't assisting him in the way that she necessarily wants to. She wants to fight by him side by side, from what I gather. But Toma essentially views her as, I guess you could say, motivation. she motivates him because he sees her as someone he absolutely needs to protect. But I don't think it's necessarily just because it's Mikoto. I think Toma views a lot of people in this way. I think he views women this way. I think he views underclassmen this way. He views children this way. It's kind of just in Toma's personality to want to protect people like that need it. Frankly put, he's very chivalrous. I do really like the relationship that Toma and Mikoto have. I'll be interested to see where this actually goes moving forward, because in the afterword, Kazuma Kamachi did talk more about that in particular. He says that despite knowing that Toma views Mikoto in this way, she still wants to work her hardest towards becoming someone that like fights on an equal level and helps Toma in a way that other people can't. So yeah, I'm just interested to see where Mikoto's character is going to go in Index. I've heard a lot of people complain about like the way Mikoto is written in the Index light novel as compared to like Railgun. And I mean, I don't see any reason to dislike her character as of yet. And part of me, as I'm reading it, thinks that Kazuma Kamachi doesn't want to write Mikoto in this super compelling way in Index because he wants to save it for Railgun. But that seems like an odd perspective to take. I don't know. She's such an interesting case because she is really different in Railgun as compared to Index, but that's kind of on purpose, as Railgun is written more from her perspective, where she's this super cool level 5 in Academy City where everyone, kind of holds them in high regard. And then in Index, you have, the story obviously mostly focused around Toma in this completely different world with magic and these beings that are far greater than, any of the level 5s could really fathom outside of maybe Accelerator. It's an interesting dilemma. It definitely is. I still very much so enjoy her parts in Index. She is still one of my favorite characters in the series. Absolutely. At this point, I'm just curious about what direction her character is going to be taken in the future. And I also like to think about the fact that Index is supposedly going to be like 100 volumes long or something. I think Kazuma Kamachi and I think the editor, is his name Miki. I think someone said that for what Kazuma Kamachi is planning, it would take about 100 volumes to accomplish that. And so I think that there is a lot of time for Mikoto and other characters like Index as well to develop a lot from where they are now. And I'm just really interested to see where some of these characters are going to go by the end of this entire series. It's really crazy to think about it that way. All right, well, I don't want this video to be too long, which I keep saying, but I'm going to try to wrap things up pretty quickly here and just give my thoughts on the epilogue and general thoughts on the volume and New Testament up to this point. But I'll go ahead and say the epilogues always slap. Kazuma Kamachi knows how to write such engaging epilogues. He is really great with cliffhangers and mysteries and stuff like that. I like the amount of mysteries and things that I want answered in this series. It's like I can't even remember them all. Maybe that's not a good thing. I don't know, but I kind of like it. I love having way too many questions that I want answered. Maybe that's not the I don't know. Maybe that's a bad perspective, but I don't know why. I think mystery is such an important thing for keeping a reader engaged. And so there's so many things like that they're building up in this series that I can't wait to see the resolutions to. But the magic gods, oh my gosh, they just killed them. They just killed them all. They just killed all the magic gods. They killed Zombie, who I didn't even know was there, to be frank. From in New Testament 12, High Priest died from freaking Kihara dog. Oh, here was the weirdest thing. I knew about Mr. Kamisato. I've been spoiled on some stuff with Kamisato, unfortunately. Apparently he's kind of a meme. I see a lot of controversy and memes about Kamisato. I didn't realize he was going to show up at the end of this volume. I was kind of mind blown when this dude shows up out of nowhere and just absorbs Nyang Nyang. I sure hope I'm saying this name right, because if I'm not, I'm gonna sound really, really silly saying Yang Yang, right? It's kind of fun, but also hard to say. But Kamisato legit comes out of nowhere in a pretty cool fashion, I would say so myself. I think he's actually pretty cool so far from what I've seen in just the epilogue. And he just absorbs her. And apparently it was revealed that the true goal of the real gremlin, because you know all those other fake gremlins, right? The true goal was for them to essentially discover a new world, is what I gathered from it. The magic gods essentially felt, I guess you could say, like trapped by this troublesome world where they were stuck in like this distorted phase, and their mere existence could just destroy the entire world. And so they wanted to, as he says, spread their wings in a new world that no one else knew of yet. And so he absorbed Yang Yang through what is called World Rejector, which I didn't fully understand the explanation of what World Rejector is. I assume in the next volume it's going to be explained more, because I looked at the name of the arc for the next volume, and it's called the World Rejector arc. So I hope I get a better understanding of it there. I would assume so. But hey, his right hand made Yang Yang feel euphoria. That man's got he's got hands all right. And then through some dialogue we find out that he's apparently absorbed, like many other magicians, maybe other magic gods as well. I'm not exactly quite sure yet, but he's absorbed some people with that right hand of his. I'm wondering why he's absorbing them. Does he gain power from it? I don't know. Well, obviously I'll probably find out in the later volumes. At the very least, we have one surviving magic god, and that is Nephthys. Leave it up to Cosmokamachi to leave the sexiest one alive, right? One thing I guess I was slightly disappointed on was just how weakened the magic gods were in this arc. So they said they were strong enough to destroy the world, but they lacked the power to recreate it. So like they weren't that strong, unfortunately. In this volume, I mean, that's still pretty strong. You can still obviously destroy the world. It's like way stronger than basically like any other character in the series, to my knowledge. I don't know. I mean, my power scaling might be whack, but I mean, I think you get the idea. But I kind of pitied the magic gods. I actually just felt bad for them. They didn't really seem bad per se. I mean, it didn't particularly seem like they had evil intentions. Like it seemed, like I said earlier, it seemed they just wanted to spread their wings in a new world that no one else had known about yet. I mean, their very existence is very much so a threat, considering they can destroy the world at any second. But Nephthys and Yang Yang were pretty adamant about not really causing any sort of damage. The only time they threatened as much was when High Priest died and Yang Yang said that she was going to level out Academy City. Essentially to protect themselves. But regardless, I just felt bad for them. I just kind of pity them. More so Nephthys and Yang Yang. I'm happy at least Nephthys is alive though, right? And I'm really interested to see where Kamisato goes as a character, because I've heard really mixed things about him. Like I've heard some people love him and some people hate him. I got one comment that was kind of like spoiling me for some reason, which is kind of annoying. But someone described Kamisato's power or whatever as being fan fiction BS, which I can kind of see, because they described it as like when the magic users came together and created, and all their hopes and desires or whatever, created Imagine Breaker, it wasn't enough to contain all of their desires or whatever, and so all of their hopes, so some of it spilled out or whatever and created World Rejector, which I can't lie does kind of sound like fan fiction. But that's also kind of a lazy argument, in my opinion, to just say something sounds like fan fiction, because you're not saying anything. You're not saying anything about what's actually being written. That's a really lazy complaint, to just say it sounds like fan fiction. It's like Well, let's see where the author goes with it. Let me give the author the benefit of the doubt and see what he wants to do with this in the story. If it's well done, it's well done. If it's not, then I'll criticize it for where I think it goes wrong, right? That's kind of how I think it should work. I don't think calling something fan fiction BS is a particularly good criticism. Anyways, last thing I want to note before I move on, just general thoughts and wrapping up the video. Lola Stewart. They did a name change on me. So I've been slightly spoiled on her. I made the mistake of looking at her wiki page for like 3 seconds, and I don't even remember what I saw, but I'll just like I won't say anything else about it. I've been slightly spoiled, but it's nothing like major. I don't really know much else. I don't really know anything about her, honestly. That was like a year ago or something too. So it's like I know something is up with her, but I don't know what exactly is kind of where I am. So whatever they do with her is not going to be like a total surprise, but it will still, like, I still don't know what's coming. But I am so excited to see what they do with Lola Stewart, whatever the heck. I'm going to call her Lola Stewart, because she has been a character from the very beginning that I've been super interested in. And they keep teasing stuff about her character in these epilogues, and I am so excited for whatever is going to happen with her. I've found her to be one of the most mysterious and interesting characters in the series from the very beginning that I've always wanted to know more about. So yeah, I'm pretty excited for whatever they do with her. Anyways, to wrap up what I thought about New Testament 13, I very much so enjoyed this volume, like I enjoyed all of these volumes. Like I said before, I think New Testament has been extremely consistent, and so far there haven't been any bad volumes at all. I think it's been great so far. In particular, New Testament 13 had a lot of twists that I was not expecting, mostly coming from the epilogue. I did enjoy Mikoto's presence throughout the volume, and I'm really interested to see where they're going to go with her moving forward. One of the highlights for me was just Mie Akikawa and her family, which is probably the lamest thing ever for me to care about, but hey, I just really like stuff like that, apparently. Yeah, like I said, despite how huge of an arc it was, I just find it funny that that's actually one of the highlights for me, was just like, oh, this middle school girl and her family situation. Oh, why does this hit hard? I don't know. Fiamma was another highlight of this volume for me, and I hope he's not dead. I don't know if he's going to be dead or not. They didn't confirm. To me, it's always like, if they're not just outright telling me, yep, he is definitely 100% dead, then I'm always like kind of skeptical to, I'm not really ready to admit, oh yeah, he's dead. It kind of has to be blatant and in my face most of the time, not all the time. I also wrote in my notes, I'm missing Accelerator. Accelerator has not been in any of these volumes for this video. When are you going to bring back my boy? I miss him. Rest in peace, Yang Yang. I actually legitimately am sad about Yang Yang. I kind of want her to come back. I don't know if that's ever going to happen, but I don't know. I just missed Yang Yang. I wanted to see more of her. I was really excited for her character, and then they just kind of like did that to her. But yeah, that is, oh man, this video, I think this was my longest one yet. It's as I'm recording this, I hit the hour 45-minute arc. So yeah, this is even longer than the Oathiness one. I didn't think it would be this long. I actually thought it would be under an hour, but I talked about Shokuhou for 40 minutes. So maybe in the future I will try to not talk as long, unless you guys just like me talking longer. I mean, would you guys prefer these videos be shorter or longer? Am I going into too much detail, not enough detail? I would appreciate the feedback. If you made it this far, you are a complete Chad. You're a Sigma. Your muscles are bulging. I'm trying to look at your eyes, but I can't because your muscles are distracting me. No. Thank you for watching. Absolutely. I deeply appreciate everyone that watches these videos or listens to these videos in their entirety. And I always say it, I always point it out, but I really, really love the comments. I don't even ask people to like the videos or anything, because frankly, I don't really care. Above all else, I love getting comments. It's one of my favorite things, is that when I log onto this account and I see that I have a notification and it's some like long-winded comment about just talking about whatever volumes or whatever in the series, I get pretty excited, because I genuinely love the conversation. And like I say, a lot of you guys write really thoughtful comments, and you guys help me out with the things I don't understand. You clear up some misconceptions I have, and you get excited alongside me while I read this series. And it's really crazy that I have anyone that actually is getting excited alongside me with this series as I'm reading. It's like, you don't have to sit here and listen to this complete imbecile ramble nonsensically about this light novel series for way too long. But hey, I appreciate everyone that listens to these and leaves the long, thoughtful comments. It's a great feeling, and I want to make sure that I convey how grateful that I am for the people that do show up here and, you know, interact and stuff, because it's really cool. It's a very small community that we have, but it's really cool, I think. Hopefully it will not take me as long to read the next few volumes. The next video, you know, covering index should be volumes 14 through 17, I was told, is a good stopping point. Maybe there will be some videos in between. Maybe I'll read Biohacker, maybe I'll reread Astral Buddy. I'm not quite sure yet. The next video will not be an index video, but I promise I will try to read through these volumes a bit quicker, because you know, with the whole Christmas break and everything, a lot of stuff was going on, and I kind of wasn't reading very consistently. But you know what, we're back, and I'm having fun. I'm excited for what is to come. I'm over halfway done with New Testament. That's pretty crazy to think about, but I still got a lot of videos that I want to make about the series, so we will keep going. As always, thank you for watching. I appreciate you if you do. I have my Twitter in the description. It is a different name. It's under the name ProzCD. It's not under the name Emerald, which might be confusing, but I promise that is my Twitter. Oh, by the way, I got a new profile picture for the channel, if you noticed. I have the artist linked in the description as well. Their art is absolutely fantastic. Actually, both of my profile pictures on both my music channel and this channel are by that same artist that I commissioned to make them. And I absolutely love it. I absolutely love the art. I'm glad that I have something original to the channel, for this channel now, to use instead of that that image I was using before, which I did think fit the vibe of this channel, I will say. But this one does too, of course. And it's original, which makes it awesome, right? So anyways, like I said, appreciate you for watching. Thank you. I hope you have a nice day, night, week, month, year, decade, life.